CJ should be in Lexington, Kentucky by now. He left Columbus, Ohio nearly 4 hours ago. He's now in Batesville, Illinois, a small town around 6,000 people. When he passed the Welcome Illinois sign, he got kind of nervous, but he trusted his innate sense of direction, or what he thought was his innate sense of direction. It turns out he doesn't have one, and he was lost. It cost him an hour of his time. Everyone has been lost, from a toddler wandering around a store to an older couple completing a cross-country trip. Everyone has had the question or experience where they've asked themselves a question to which they had no answer. Where am I? The toddler may have just been wandering around the store and wandered off from his parents, which resulted in the store clerk having to make an announcement over the intercom asking someone to pick up the child at the courtesy desk. And the husband and the older couple may still not be listening to his wife when she tells him to stop and ask for directions, and instead playing his own route into oblivion. As technology originally established for the military becomes more common, many people are relying on the amazing technology of GPS to keep themselves from getting lost. Even with this amazing technology, should we still care about what we do if we were to get lost? Where are you right now? If you answer with a location, you successfully completed the first step of navigation. Navigation is both an ability and an act. It involves knowing where you are, both in a larger sense, like a town or city, for instance, 38119, which is the school's area code, as well as a more specific context, for instance, a specific structure or address, such as Westminster Academy, 2500 Ridgeway Road. To navigate, you need to know where you're going and how to get there, as well as having access to where you're going. If you don't have access, you're not going to get there. There are 3 other keys in navigation. The first is knowing what direction you're going, knowing angles, and knowing how far you've traveled. Knowing the direction you're going can be as simple as based on a landmark, or it can be as complex as knowing the exact heading on a compass. Headings on a compass are measured in angles, from true north or magnetic north. They're measured in degrees. These angles also play a part in navigation. There are angles all over, from a turn, right angle turn, on a street or pathway, to the shadows the sun casts that we can use to determine the compass point or determine the time. Compass points have angles. North is 90 degrees from west, as south is 90 degrees from east. We also use angles in triangulation, where from 3 points we can use trigonometric functions to determine our location. Distance can be as simple as just reading the measure of an odometer on a car, or slightly more complex by recording the start and end points of your journey and calculating distance between. Navigation isn't just for navigating around the Earth, though. It's also used in software, websites, DVD menus, and video games. For example, on a website, you know which page you're on, which links you're planning on clicking, whether you're getting deeper into the web page or heading back to the home page, whether you're going forward or backward, and about how many pages you've been to. In a video game, you have a mini-map often that you can use to aid your navigation. It'll display players and other objects, as well as your orientation in terms of north and south. Navigation at the most basic level, though, requires a sense of direction and location, not necessarily an absolute knowledge of where you are. There are many tools for navigation. God has set a very firm and reliable foundation in His creation. Man has tools that aid in the use of these cornerstones, as well as tools that are more independent. Tools such as maps, landmarks, compasses, GPS, street grids, and celestial bodies such as the sun, moon, and stars all aid in our navigation. Few people know or think about the stars. The ancients knew them very well and relied on them. One example of this is the Egyptians, who built their temples and pyramids in alignment with the stars for a sense of direction. Street grids form a very basic and reliable standard of direction as well. Streets running east and west and north and south, although some other axes at times form blocks between parallel and the perpendicular roads. The first example of a street grid is the Indus Valley civilization, which was around 2600 BC. Later, although the Greeks did not start with a grid system, they converted the city of Miletus in 479 BC with the help of Adonis. When colonists started heading to the United States, not all cities were built using street grid. An example of those would be Boston, which is not based on a grid pattern. One of the first cities in the United States to be built on a grid pattern was Philadelphia. The earliest navigators used landmarks in sight to help navigate. Some used the sun and the stars, although their methods were not perfect and very error-prone. They didn't work in inclement weather with poor visibility, and they were limited when sailing just to navigating near shore. Between 1040 and 1117 AD, the Chinese created and used a magnetic compass. This allowed them to navigate in inclement weather, and then in 1300, the Europeans had adopted and suited the compass to their sailing needs. After the compass came the cross-staff, and then the sextant. These used the celestial bodies based on altitude and a date, the sailors could refer to a chart, which would give them their location. This still required visibility, either to the moon, the sun, or one of the 57 stars reliable for navigation. The sextant enabled an absolute location. This required the creation of a new system of latitude and longitude, so you could refer to the absolute location. Latitude is based on lines running east to west from the equator, measured in degrees from 0 to 90, and indicated north or south with N or S. Longitude runs north to south, and longitude did not have a natural start like the equator for latitude. So after much deliberation, a line was established in Greenwich, London. GPS, which is the Global Positioning System, is the United States version of the GNSS, the Global Navigation Satellite System. Many other countries are developing their own global navigation satellite systems, including the Galileo system, which is being established by the European Union, amongst other countries, as well as the QZSS, which Japan is developing to provide better coverage of the Japanese islands. The United States GPS system is composed of 24 satellites that civilians know about, possibly more classified military satellites, along with the receiver. This receiver can determine location, speed, direction if moving, and provides a very specific reference for time. The GPS system for the United States was named NavStar and was created by the United States Defense Department. It's currently maintained by the 50th Space Wing of the United States Air Force. The first prototype satellite was launched in 1974 and promptly failed. In 1977, a new batch of satellites was started launching. By 1985, 11 satellites were in orbit, which was enough to provide a working system. This technology was originally established for the military by the Defense Department, but Ronald Reagan made it available to the public because of what he deemed to be its common good. GPS technology works by the receiver locking onto 4 or more satellites. The receiver uses the time it takes for the signal to go from the satellite to the receiver to determine 4 variables. The signal travels through space at the speed of light, but upon hitting the atmosphere, it slows down. The 4 variables that the GPS receiver determines are X, Y, Z, and T, representing the first 4 dimensions. Boats are an example of something that would not require a 4th dimension. If you know a 4th variable, if you know one of the variables, you only need 3 satellites. And since we know boats are always going to be at sea level, hopefully, there's no need to find that variable. With this better technology, people no longer feel the need to ask, where is it, or how am I going to get there? They only ask, what's the address? They don't feel that they need to know how or where it is, and they use the GPS as their navigational brain. Most of the population claims to be directionally challenged. GPS seems like the perfect answer for their problems, but it may actually be detrimental. If you have no need to think of navigation, are you? Chances are that you are not. Many people casually enjoy the stars and the constellations, but they don't realize that they're a reliable method used for navigation and a method that's been used for centuries. More advanced hobby astronomers will know more about how the stars relate to directions, but for many, the north and the name of the North Star is all that people will know about stars and their relation to direction. With modern navigation technology, people often don't think of natural resources and how they can be used to navigate. For example, one example of this would be daylight savings time. It was adopted because the populace wanted it for their work patterns. Before daylight savings time, which was created by William Willett and instated by the United States in 1918, people could measure time and distance or direction based on the shadows cast by the sun without having to correct for anything other than just natural discrepancies based on the rotation of the sun. GPS is not a bad technology, and it is not necessarily misused. The problem is people's lack of the fundamental knowledge of navigation. Not everybody needs to be a diligent Boy Scout, or be able to navigate out of a 1,000-acre forest with nothing but the clothes on their back. But they will be safer if they can navigate with whatever tools they have available. Should people know where they are, and should they know where they're going? Everyone is required to navigate, although the extent may vary. Past probably around the age of 12, children are asked to navigate in urban areas, and maybe even the woods. When people turn 16, they're often navigating roadways on a regular basis. On a longer road trip, people often pull out the atlas, which is a trustworthy traditional atlas, a staple of American travel since the early 1900s. If you're able to use an atlas, which some people find challenging, specifically to find the most efficient route, if you can use one to find your route and plan your route, you'll find it to be very reliable and very robust. With the introduction of GPS in cars particularly, the navigation woes of many have been solved, or so the taglines read. Under the right circumstances, GPS is easier and can provide more specific plans for people. The alerts that it gives can prove useful when, after hours on the interstate, all the exit signs begin to look the same. GPS is not always a killer, and while it is annoying at times, it is more fun than Atlas because you know an atlas will never talk, especially in a C3PO's voice. GPS can be beneficial to the populace because it's easy to use at times, it's fast, calculating the route, and at times it's accurate. And all this relates to the directions it gives and to the assistance it can provide when you're navigating. It can also be safer because you're not juggling a map or an atlas while you're trying to drive, and it can prompt the drivers, for example, like the exits. Although, some people may not have to think about that to provide justification for it. They may just be glad that it can help them get unlost if they were to drive into a less safe part of town. The problem with all this is, though, when the GPS fails. There's many causes of this. One cause would be an interruption between the building, because of a building, or because of even an enemy or a terrorist attack. Solar flares also cause an interruption in the satellite signal. And many people are afraid that from 2011, when solar flares are supposed to peak, that GPS will be very inaccurate. Another reason would be the receiver just fails, either because of a problem with the electronics or because of something as basic as a dead battery. When it fails, all the positive elements I've said just before about a GPS are obviously negated. Without the GPS, people who've been relying on it are going to find their navigation slower, and they may be lost, because if they've been relying on it, they might have no clue where they are or how to get where they're going. And especially with today's technology, we as a society become easily dependent on tools. An example of this would be someone whose computer fails on them, or someone who leaves their cell phone at home. They just don't know what to do without it. And we're just as prone to become reliant in this way on GPS technology. We can't count on relying on technology that has no guarantee against failure. We need to know how to navigate without its assistance, for example, with an atlas or just a map. And we need to be able to continue a path should it fail, and be able to go out and forge our own based on the compass or the direction the sun is setting, or even just landmarks. The safest and easiest way of navigating would be to combine both GPS and the more traditional ways. You can look at and comprehend what the GPS is going to tell you in terms of directions before you start on your trip. Then you're prepared for turns, and you don't end up slamming on your brakes because that turn right back there was the one you're supposed to take. So use the GPS as a notification system rather than just relying on either tool alone. Today's GPS doesn't have human insight to it, and probably will not for a long time to come, ever. For example, many GPS users report being led to a ferry rather than a bridge, and the ferry may or may not be running at the time. And also, in January of 2008, a man in a rental car was following the GPS. He took its directions, turned right onto the railroad tracks with an oncoming train.
Oh.
The human just needs to pay attention and not just use GPS, so use navigation as well. Does using a GPS lower the driver's level of safety? Is there a point at which there is no hope for someone to learn to navigate? Is technology to such a level that it can be completely relied upon? Without a dedicated shotgun navigator, both GPS and traditional methods such as an atlas are going to lower the driver's level of attention. GPS seems to be better in this area because it's easier to manage, no following big books and pages. It can talk to you, and it's going to be updating the map to where you are, so you don't have to be looking for where you are on an atlas. GPS can also be used irresponsibly, which is why many manufacturers block some functions and menu options when the vehicle is in motion. The driver is the key to all this stuff. The driver just needs to use proper judgment. Some people argue that they cannot learn to navigate. This is not true. They may be directionally challenged just as some people are mathematically challenged. And it may take them more effort, but everybody can learn to navigate. The saying goes, you can't teach your dog new tricks. But I don't think of navigation as such a new trick. People have grown up with it. It's been a part of all their lives, and they don't realize it. And it's been instilled in the universe for forever. These people who claim to be directionally challenged may not end up excelling to a state of proficiency. But they should be able to do the basics, navigate based on kind of compass points and landmarks especially. The other part of GPS is the brink of failure and their reliability. GPS and consumer electronics are designed to be very robust. They use components like flash memory, which is very durable. But with all the precautions consumer electronics manufacturers take, still 1 in 6 devices fails shortly after its purchase. There's also just the fact of lemons in a bad batch. And not only are we relying on the GPS receiver that you go and purchase, to use GPS we're also relying on the satellites. These satellites have a limited lifespan and they cannot be repaired once they are in orbit. Many of these satellites, in fact most, are past their life expectancy. New satellites are being launched, but the rate of satellites that are growing old far surpasses those of the new satellites. Other problems that will be around for a long time to come are that batteries die. The GPS may die when you need it most. There's, of course, also interference and the problems buildings cause, and you might need to move the GPS to get a clearer view. But if you don't know where you are, you're not going to be able to move to get a clearer view. The man who rode onto the railroad tracks would have benefited greatly from common sense. But he also would have benefited from knowing where he was rather than just relying on GPS. Many people can attest to turning at the wrong spot, misled by their GPS. This could all be remedied if a person only knew where they were going or had an idea instead of just relying on the GPS. Both traditional methods of navigating and GPS are good, and both bring beneficial aspects to the table. But GPS is not ready to stand on its own yet. It's very complex, which is shown by its ability to suggest a ferry. I would not think of thinking a ferry, but it does. But GPS is also not capable of thinking like a human, which is also shown by the ferry example. It can't see whether it's running or not, and just can't plan things that computers and artificial intelligence are not ready to do yet. And humans have to make these decisions for the GPS. And then when humans do decide to make these decisions, like looking for railroad tracks, this leads to safer and more reliable navigation. GPS technology will progress, and maybe someday it will replace it. There will always be problems just inherent in nature, such as solar flares that GPS must overcome. But at one point, they may no longer interfere with the GPS. At that point, the human will most likely no longer need to drive, and the computer will be making the decisions to be in control anyway. In the meantime, we need to know how to navigate without the assistance